This content is brought to you by Uphold, which makes crypto investing easy. I've been a user of Uphold since 2017. They're one of my go-to exchanges. You can buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrencies on Uphold. You can also trade precious metals and equities. They have 10 plus million users, 250 plus cryptocurrencies, and they're available in 150 countries. As with all exchanges, you can buy and sell on them, but I highly recommend you custody your own crypto, not your keys, not your coins. If you'd like to learn more about Uphold, please visit the link in the description. Welcome back to the Thinking Crypto podcast, your home for cryptocurrency news and interviews. With me today is Marisa Coppel, who is the senior counsel at Blockchain Association. Marisa, it's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks, Tony. It's good to be back.
So Marisa, there's lots to talk about. First, I would like to start with the Blockchain Association filing a FOIA request to get more details between the communications and relationship between Prometheum and the SEC. Many folks on crypto Twitter and a lot of folks are looking into Prometheum to see what is this company, what's going on here. It seems like some sort of plant by the SEC. What are your thoughts and what kind of sparked the FOIA request?
Yeah, I mean, I think what sparked the FOIA request was the same thing that sparked all the sleuths, or I guess people putting their sleuth hat on crypto Twitter. But really, it's just a little bit fishy that there was a approval of the special purpose broker-dealer license, in the midst of the SEC coming down really hard on the rest of the crypto industry. And then, like, to top it off, Prometheum had a seat in front of Congress, and it seemed like they were really just like reading pre-written responses in response to certain members of Congress questions. So there's something fishy going on. I don't know exactly what, but it's just like a bit odd. And we wanted to send a FOIA request to hopefully uncover some of the information and like behind the scenes dealings between the SEC and Prometheum.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, the juxtaposition between Coinbase getting sued, Binance and these other platforms, and Prometheum gets this license, and they haven't been a major player in the market. I don't believe they were trading any crypto as far as I know, which is really weird.
Yeah, it is very weird. And it's also weird that they're basically painting the picture that there's a compliant path for crypto, which, as you and I'm sure your listeners know, is just like not the case at all. There's no clear path whatsoever, despite many industry stakeholders asking for a clear path. And for that narrative to, get put out to the public is just totally misleading. And I think especially in light of the fact that despite that Prometheum is approved for this special purpose broker-dealer license, they can't actually list any crypto asset securities because no crypto asset securities are actually registered. So because there's no clear path to registration. So even though they have this approval, like they can't really do anything with it because there's no clear path to registration.
Yeah. So when you look at that, it's almost like the SEC is playing political games here versus, they're supposed to represent retail investors, try to protect investors, but it just seems they're muddying the waters with political agendas and whatever else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, their mission is to protect investors and promote capital formation. And that's not what's happening.
So once the FOIA request and everything is processed, and let's hope the SEC doesn't try to push back on that, how will the Blockchain Association use that information? Let's say you do find something that is not good in that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to speculate on like what we might find, and that's like assuming that we get documents. FOIA responses can take a very long time, and the agency can drag it out. There's definitely opportunities to litigate it. If the agency doesn't respond, then somebody who filed the request can litigate the issue and have a court force them to respond. Not saying that the Blockchain Association will or will not do that, but there's definitely an option to force the SEC to turn some documents over. But in terms of how we would use them, I think we would want the SEC to be held accountable for if there's any sort of wrongdoing. They're an agency, and the members of the agency, including the commissioners, are supposed to be fair and impartial, and really, like, they're supposed to be held in the utmost, like, highest standard. So it would only be fair to the public if there was some wrongdoing to have whoever was responsible for it to be held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of folks are waiting for that, more accountability on the SEC, because it seems things are just all over the place. Chair Gensler has some political agendas, but it seems like members of Congress, especially in the House Financial Services Committee, are on it. Many of them oversee the SEC. There's also another item that the Blockchain Association recently executed with regards to the SEC. You guys sent a comment letter regarding a proposal expanding the definition of an exchange. Tell us about the whole situation here and what was in your comment letter.
Yeah, so this one's particularly interesting to me, I think, because it attacks DeFi. And I guess just to start from the beginning, the SEC published a proposal for rulemaking, a proposal for new rulemaking, and there's a notice and comment procedure that started last January. So January of 2022, they published this proposed rule, and then the public got to comment on it, which that period started April of 2022. And the rule changes the definition of an exchange in such a way where it would pull in DeFi protocols. And the proposed rule is just written in an extremely vague way. And the SEC or any agency, when they issue a proposed rule, they have to do a cost benefit analysis. And the cost benefit analysis was very deficient. So in the original proposal back in January of 22, crypto and DeFi wasn't mentioned at all, despite the rule clearly pulling in DeFi protocols. And so the industry went crazy. A bunch of comment letters were filed, and then nothing happened. And there was silence for the past year. Basically, there was silence. And then the SEC reopened the comment period this past April. And the reopening consisted of 160-page, sort of reopening proposal that purported to assess how the rule impacted DeFi. And so then it restarted a new comment period. And so that's what we were commenting on this month. We had issued previous comment letters last year, but this comment letter was in response to the reopening. And the reopening still had the same deficiencies that the original proposal had. It was still very vague. We argued that it exceeds the SEC's statutory authority. And in my view, the cost benefit analysis as they performed it on DeFi was extremely deficient. They basically laid out how certain DeFi protocols and companies and entities and projects, how whatever word you want to use, will have to shut down in response to this proposal if it were to become final, which is a huge cost. It shuts down an entire technology, basically.
Right.
And then when they laid out the benefits, they essentially restated their mission without providing much explanation as to how the proposed rule serves the mission. So it was very deficient in our view, and we laid that out in our comment letter. Another point that was particularly angering for me in the proposal is so in order to have an exchange, you need a group of persons or a person. And in my view, if there's no group of persons or no person, then there's no exchange. It's sort of like this threshold requirement that you need based on the current statute. And the commission in this renewed proposal, they make it seem like if no person or no group of person exists, then one has to be created, which is just like not how regulations should work, you
Right.
know? So that's just one point we touched on, but our argument's really centered around how the proposal exceeds the commission's statutory authority, and then it also goes into depth on like why the cost benefit analysis was deficient.
Yeah, I understand like some of these regulators are going to struggle with DeFi. That certainly, it's a brave new world, a whole new world, and decentralized exchanges as well. But yeah, they're taking some of these draconian steps, and some of these measures they're trying to put in place is very broad. And so I appreciate, like you and the association going there and add the details and the guardrails. And so what would be the next step, as far as the comment letter has been sent? What are the next steps there?
Yeah. So in terms of next steps, I mean, it's really finalization if they choose to finalize it, and they can make changes in the process of finalizing it. So they would issue sort of like an explanation of why they're finalizing it in whatever form they're finalizing it in. I would expect that if it's finalized in its current form, they will be sued over it. Not necessarily like by the blockchain association, but just the other industry stakeholders, because the rule as it was laid out in the proposal is like an industry killer. So I think many of the comment letters raised litigation risk. So I think that would follow if the rule was finalized. It's possible though that the rule is never finalized. So, they don't have a specific timeline that they have to finalize a rule by. Chair Gensler has proposed several rules, not just crypto related, and none of them have been finalized so far. So we'll see if this one does get finalized. But I think, they would have their plate very, very busy if it did, because I'm certain that somebody will sue over it.
Sure. And we're seeing just the industry kind of going on the offensive, suing the SEC. We have Coinbase suing the SEC, and many have said, we're going to take a stand, which I really like, because we need Congress to act, and hopefully if Congress sees an industry is well, I shouldn't say attack, but is fighting back against the SEC and kind of the draconian overreach, maybe it will light a fire and creates a sense of urgency for them to pass some clear regulations. I know you guys are working on a lot. Is there anything else you want to highlight in addition to what we discussed? I know you guys have sent amicus briefs in the Coinbase situation, Ripple as well. Any other items that you want to highlight?
Yeah, we just filed an amicus brief a few weeks ago in Coin Center's Tornado Cash lawsuit. And our brief largely mirrored the one we filed in the Tornado Cash lawsuit that Coinbase is funding. That's the one filed in Texas. Coin Center's is filed in Florida. So that's one thing that hopefully will make a difference in that case. And then we also submitted a comment letter in response to the IRS's request for guidance as to whether NFTs should be considered collectibles under the tax code. I'm not a tax lawyer, so like we used outside counsel to help us with that just because of like how specific the tax code is. But it was an interesting issue for sure. And we're engaging with various members of Congress office, and also we're engaged on the new bills that are being worked on right now. There's a stablecoin bill and the market structure bill. I believe Lummis Gillibrand just reintroduced hers. So there's a lot going on.
What do you think about the recent Patrick McHenry and Congressman Glenn Thompson bill? That seems to hit the nail on the head with regards to SEC versus CFTC. What's a commodity? What's a security? And the guardrails for both of those agencies.
Totally.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the effort is amazing. It's extremely comprehensive, and they're very open to feedback, which is awesome. So I'm hopeful that something will happen as a result of this. But I do think that it just indicates that we need clarity. And Congress is they're paying attention to that. So that's positive.
Now, in the SEC Ripple lawsuit, just last week, we had the Hinman emails and documents released. They're very revealing. I think it certainly puts the SEC in a bad light, and some of the potential impropriety that took place there. What are your thoughts on those emails being released? Is there anything that the Blockchain Association is using from those emails? And what are the implications for all those folks who are fighting back against the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, the emails seemed very positive for Ethereum, right? It's still a little bit unclear to me, like how the emails help Ripple, other than like showing potential impropriety, within the agency. But I guess we'll see how much weight the judge gives them in the final ruling, which I'm hopeful that we'll see soon.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's not like a direct impact to the Ripple lawsuit, as in anything specific to XRP, but almost like in the court of public opinion, we're showing the SEC itself is not on the same page, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to regulate this. They need Congress to act, despite what Chair Gensler is saying. So I think it breaks a lot of narratives down that have been put out there by Chair Gensler and some other folks. And what, for example, Commissioner Hester Peirce and these folks have been saying for years, and trying to get something in place to help bridge the gap between the crypto industry and the regulators.
Right, sure. It certainly breaks down the narrative that Prometheum is trying to paint, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, with all that said, with all the headwinds we're facing and all the challenges right now, all of a sudden BlackRock says, hey, we're going to file for a Bitcoin spot ETF. Just this morning, we heard Fidelity, Charles Schwab, and Citadel Securities are launching their crypto exchange. I think it was reported Deutsche Bank is also applying for a crypto custody license. What are your thoughts? It's two things happening in parallel here. And it's easy to put a tinfoil hat and say, yeah, I think we saw this coming. It seems like the regulators are working on behalf of these incumbents. What are your thoughts on this?
I try to take the positive view of it, like TradFi wants in on this, and crypto is not dead, nor is dying. So I think this is just an indication that crypto is very much so alive. Yeah. It will be interesting to see what happens to the BlackRock ETF application, especially given that, I think that the court will be ruling in Grayscale's lawsuit probably end of this summer, early mid-fall, I would think. So that could make a difference.
On that note, do you feel some legal experts have said that it seems like Grayscale is going to win this? Do you have that same thought and feeling around that? And could we potentially see Grayscale get their Bitcoin ETF approved before BlackRock?
I'm not sure what the timing looks like in terms of the approval process, but I'm hopeful that Grayscale will win. I thought that, I don't know if you listened to the oral argument, but I thought that it sounded like, the judges were leaning toward Grayscale. And Don Verrilli, who argued on behalf of Grayscale, just did an absolutely fantastic job, laying out the issues in a very simple way. And to me, it was sort of obvious Grayscale should win, but obviously I'm biased. Mm-hmm. So, but I do feel hopeful. And I think I feel more hopeful in that case than compared to a lot of the other ones. I just think the case is very clear, and hopefully the judges see it that way.
Final question here for you. So we see the SEC is suing these exchanges, Coinbase, Binance, and so forth. But what they're doing, they're throwing a bunch of tokens in those lawsuits. Here's 10, here's 20 or 13. The recent ones included Cardano, the ADA token, Solana, and Matic. Are you guys in any way trying to help those token projects? I know it's complex. You may still be digesting and reviewing all this because they're not being sued directly like how Ripple was. It's kind of passive. And if these exchanges settle for whatever reason, Gary Gensler walks away with a kind of a pseudo win. See, I told you these tokens are securities. What are your thoughts on that strategy that SEC is using?
Yeah, I mean, this is like extremely problematic. It's regulation by enforcement, but not just normal regulation by enforcement. It's like regulation by enforcement against third parties who have no way of having their voice heard in the matter. They can't intervene in the lawsuits. There's a statute that says that. There might be arguments that exist where someone could intervene, but I mean, nobody has tried yet, at least. So it's really problematic. And I think it raises some serious due process concerns. And it is part of the SEC strategy too, is like, they're very clearly trying to name these tokens in the lawsuits in order to make it known that they believe that these digital assets constitute securities. And then there's, of course, some negative repercussions that follow. So I think it's just like the opposite of how an agency should act. Mm-hmm. And it's really disheartening to see this happen over and over again. Like it started with Wahi, and then, now with Coinbase and Binance. And it's very stressful, I'm sure, for the projects that were named. Yeah, it's really unfortunate.
Quick follow-up question there. I don't know if you can answer his question or, if you've heard anything. Given all these enforcement actions, especially against Coinbase, which was like the most regulated crypto business in the United States, obviously green-lighted by the SEC to go do an IPO, go public and all that. Is there any backlash that you're hearing maybe in DC, even from maybe the supporters of Gary Gensler and the SEC, like mostly Democrats and so forth? Are you hearing anything of folks distancing themselves a bit? Like, okay, he took it a little bit too far there.
There's some that are supporters of our industry who recognize what the SEC is doing. And I think that this just was like the cherry on top, it solidified that. I haven't heard anything like directly because I'm not necessarily the one who's in front of these members of Congress every day. Sure. I know that you talk to Ron too, and he's the one who's like in front of them, and Dave on our team as well. But I do think that there's like a general recognition that the SEC is being extremely aggressive, and it's not always with cause.
For sure. Marisa, great stuff. Thank you so much for joining me. It was certainly going to have you back on as those FOIA request details come out around Prometheum. Sure. But thank you so much for joining me.
Definitely. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.